Okay, Nick, hello, how are you?
Oh, good. Thanks, Louise. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for
Good.
joining with us today. We'd just like to take some time and learn a little bit about your journey to diagnosis and what you've learned along the way.
Absolutely.
So, would you like to start with your initial symptoms?
Certainly. So, I was, so I first started developing symptoms when I was about 18 or 19. I started experiencing some weakness in my legs. I was having difficulties with bladder control, and being a teenager, I was way too embarrassed to talk to my mum or dad about, or the doctor about bladder control. I just thought, oh, maybe it's one of those weird things that happens when you grow up. And then with my legs, I was doing a heap of cycling at that time, about 400 or 500 kilometers a week, and I just thought that I wasn't training hard enough, and so I was just pushing myself harder and harder, and then I started developing quite a lot of pain through my legs as well, and just some weird sort of tremors in my hands, that kind of thing. And then when I was 21, one day I cycled to work. I started to feel really off, felt quite disorientated, a bit dizzy, and rang up my parents, asked them to pick me up and take me home because I just didn't feel like I could cycle, and enormous amount of fatigue and also pain as well. And I went to bed, and I was in bed for pretty much 2 days, and then got up out of bed. I was struggling. I was living with my mum and dad at that time, and couldn't really even walk the flight of stairs in the house. And I just had this crushing fatigue. I'd shower myself, and that was about all I could do for the day. And yeah, and just these weird physiological sensations and that kind of thing was. Just had no idea what was going on. So I went to see the doctor. The doctor was like, "Oh yeah, maybe it's just some viral illness," and then nothing got better after about 6 months,
Wow. Did you
and they were
manage
like,
to get
"Oh,
back to work during that time?
um, a reduced amount of work." So at that time, I was completely a typical, not particularly typical young man burning the candle at both ends. So I think at that time I was working, maybe I was saving to go overseas. I think I was working 3 or 4 jobs, so working 7 days a week. I was drinking Red Bull to just sort of get me through each day, and so I was just and cycling quite large volumes, and so I was just completely not just burning the candle at both ends, but in the middle as well. And so,
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, I after that, I think I was able to continue with one job and then cut right back on another one. Um, but it was a real struggle. And yes, so about 6 months went by, and they're like, "Oh well, maybe it's just post-viral fatigue." But still didn't explain these neurological symptoms. I went to see a neurologist, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know really what's going on." And went overseas to study, and then uh, sort of stuff completely hit the fan. I had this massive episode where my vision became distorted. I all of a sudden couldn't process visual information. So there's this big cognitive impairment, and my balance just disappeared. So there's this big neurological event, and I was living in the US at that time studying, and the medical bill was eye-watering, and so we were like, okay, it'd be better to come back to New Zealand at that point. So I returned home and spent more time with neurologists, and they were like, clearly something neurologically is going on, not quite sure. And
Did they run any tests at that time, or was it all just talking to you?
uh, I did have some. When did I start having MRIs? I think I did have some MRIs at that point, but there was like nothing that was especially conclusive. And there was the thought of it being, it was presenting very much like MS, but the MRIs were just not kind of, weren't sealing the deal basically. And yeah, and so, and then another 3 or 4 years went by, and had another huge flare up, or relapse, and I was yeah, and by that point I was not really able to. I had really bad foot drop, and so I wasn't able to walk around outside, outside the house or a building, and even inside, I'd be all the time tripping on the carpet, and just from foot drop. I couldn't really manage stairs, couldn't manage any uneven surfaces because my balance was so poor. Yeah, my visual processing was impaired again, and I sort of couldn't really read, and and then lots of issues with pain, and bladder control was just. I was on a whole bunch of medications and having to wear pads and all this kind of thing, and yeah, so it was not a great time, and so finally. Saw a neurologist, and he was like, "Oh, yep, it's primary progressive MS," and at that point, I think all sort of avenues were leading towards that diagnosis. And so I remember getting that diagnosis and feeling quite relieved, but at the same time, like quite crushed by the fact that now there was this permanent diagnosis, and it was so real mixed emotions. And but
And what year was that?
that was 2024, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Oh, sorry, not 2024. 2000 and no, I was 24, so that would have been 2009.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and so I just so I was still in the mobility at the scooter at that point. So completely dependent on that for anything outside the house. And the neurologist was just like, okay, so primary progressive. This is the prognosis. You're gonna rapidly lose your ability to walk. I anticipate that you'll be in the power wheelchair within the next couple of years. And here's your bill for $400. See you next year. And it was just like, it was a completely hope. I felt completely hopeless. There was no hope offered through that interaction. And my mum, bless her heart, was kind of a little bit appalled and shocked. And so she got in contact with the MS Society, and I spoke to Amanda, and Amanda recommended a conference at that point. George Jelinek, I think, was still running conferences in New Zealand. And so mum went along to one of those, and she learned about lifestyle modifications, and came home, told me this is what I needed to do, and I was like, no, I like my my pies and my and my cake and all those kinds of things too much, and then also was just kind of sucky. Again, I was back living with mum and dad. I dropped out of university, and I'd be eating my slightly boring food by comparison to what I was used to, and mum and dad would be having a steak, and I'd be like, and so then mum and dad actually joined me, and they were like, okay, let's do this together, and that was incredibly helpful. And so at that point, I also began getting some rehab support through with an exercise physiologist. And I began to make progress. And so I went, from not being able to balance really, I think I could balance on one foot for like just a couple of seconds, and to, being 10 seconds and 15 seconds. And I sold my my mobility scooter and started walking in the garden and walking down the road, and then doing very short little tracks, and you know, progressively my ability to get outdoors increased. And for me, one of the most difficult things about the mobility scooter was that loss of access to the outdoors. You know, for me, the outdoors has always been just such an important part of my life, and so to lose that was just, it was devastating. And so so to be regaining that was just like so empowering. And then fast forward to 2015, and I'm just sort of like skipping over a whole bunch of like highs and lows, and steps forwards and steps back. But so that rehab process had got me to the point where I was able to do some quite big days in the mountains. I was able to get back climbing again, which was like as my primary passion. And I was wanting to do a I decided to take a break from my studies. I'd just begun a PhD, which I wasn't really loving, and I sort of wanted to take some time to reassess that. And but also, so I decided to head overseas with a mate to do some climbing in the Himalayas. And but I wanted my climbing to mean something more than just sort of me achieving a personal goal. And so I started thinking about, like, how can I use this to make a difference? And I was on a tramp and with a mate, Sam, who's one of the trustees at Mastery Mountain still. And he, you know, we're chatting, and we thought about this idea of doing a tramp to raise some money for to pay for some rehab for somebody. And I got in contact with Amanda, and back when it was just, when MS New Zealand was just Amanda, and I chatted to her, and she's like, oh, well, you know, it's a great idea, love the concept, but why don't you set up a charitable trust to administer any money that you raise? And I was like, oh, okay, I hadn't really thought of that. And so I investigated it, and all of the sudden, one thing led to another, and Mastery Mountains was born. And it was like the snowball that was just racing down the hill, and I was like sprinting after it to try and keep up with it. And then yeah, got to the Himalayas, attempted to climb two 6,000-meter peaks, and didn't quite make it up the first. I got some it had some contaminated water, which I mean, I was throwing up on the glacier. Yeah, it wasn't the most fun. So we turned around, and then got to the second peak, got to the top of the second peak, Island Peak, which is right next to Mount Everest. And so through all of that, was able to raise about $10,000 to start Mastering Mountains. So yeah. So you started asking me about my symptoms, so I just sort of taking it all off.
No, you carry on.
But yeah, so that was 2015, and yeah.
Gosh, so when you look back over a relatively short period of time, you've gone from severe, you know, brain fog and being unable to process information, what you're seeing, not being able to move around freely, to getting rid of the mobility scooter, to climbing a mountain.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
It was incredible, and I think I mean, it was a heck of a lot of work. I think I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I did a calculation, and I think it was like 1,800 or 2,000 hours, or somewhere in that ballpark, that I had spent in the gym, sort of getting to that point over 3 or 4 years. And so
and did you have a specialist join you in the gym? Were they a specialist in dealing with rehabilitation, or?
Yeah, so it's an exercise physiologist. And
Wow.
yeah, so she was amazing. And I think but I suppose out of that whole experience, there were sort of two or three things that really stood out to me. Yeah, there were two or three things that really stood out to me, and one of them was like how unhelpful it was that that no hope had been offered
Yeah.
through that diagnosis process. And I think that and my continued interactions with that particular neurologist, and I just want to be clear that it was that particular neurologist and not all neurologists like this, but that particular neurologist completely poo-hooed any lifestyle modifications as a way of managing MS, which,
Wow.
in retrospect is kind of quite mind-blowing to me,
Yeah.
given all the evidence for it. But I just felt like, I didn't want other people to go through that sense of hopelessness, their experience of hopelessness. And I wanted other people to have hope that actually, like, yes, having a neurological diagnosis, it sucks and it does mean change, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to mean an end to things that bring you joy and a meaningful life. And so I really wanted to sort of help change that perception, I suppose, of MS and neurological disease. So that was one thing. The second thing was just that at that point in time, there wasn't really any community that I could locate that had neurological disease plus was active in the outdoors.
Yes.
And so I found that with my local MS society at that point, which was filled with amazing people and some people really inputted into my life during that time and were incredibly helpful. And but but I was in this kind of awkward spot where my personal capacity became like I was able to do quite a lot more than a lot of other people there. But then I wasn't able to do enough. I didn't have the capacity to do the trips with like the local tramping club, for example. And
Right.
so I was kind of between two worlds. And I was like, we need community in the middle there, like for people who have neurological conditions um, and who understand those dynamics, but also are active outdoors. And so yeah, mastering mountains, I suppose, in my mind, was kind of stepped in to try and fill that gap of somewhere in between those two worlds, but
Yeah.
also to really help hopefully begin to shift the conversation a little bit so that people would get diagnosed and not feel that hopelessness, but to feel hope, to see that there is a way forward, that lifestyle modifications do work, and it is worth it. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, thanks to your mum, really, for going along to one of George's talks and
100%.
then for jumping on the bandwagon with you to try the new diet. That's what
Yeah.
really kick-started everything for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that it was that plus plus Helen from so MS Central Districts.
Mhm.
She I was initially a little bit hesitant, but Helen has a background as a vet scientist, and she jumped onto the she and I had a conversation and jumped onto the phone and she was like, oh yeah, from my science background, this has been my experience with these lifestyle modifications and the science is solid. I've looked at it and that kind of thing. So I think that combination of having mum's keenness, mum being a bit of a dog with a bone in many ways when I
Yeah.
was so. Initially I think I was in denial, which was part of the problem. But mum's sort of energy to make change, to help me through it, and then the input of others to sort of be like, yeah, no, this is solid.
They
um, you're,
supported that evidence. Yeah.
that's right. It was. I think that the combination of all of those things, but yes, mum's determination to change things. That was really the starting point for sure.
Have you found it hard between then and now to continue on with such a diet?
Yes, I think that I I suppose one thing which I've come to realize for myself is that I don't do so well on carbs, and I
Right.
do better on quality fats and proteins. And so with time, I did sort of uh, shift towards sort of more of a Wales protocol. Well, it was pretty much the Wales protocol. I couldn't quite fully afford the Wales protocol, but it was as close to it as I could get. And
Yeah.
so I think those high quality fats and the proteins definitely works better for me personally in my body. I feel like it gives me more energy, that kind of thing. So
I think that's something important to note, is that a diet that works for one person might not always work for another person, and you have
100%.
to tweak it to what
Yeah,
works for you and your body.
that's right. And I think that and I realize that for some people, carbs work really well. And so I
Yeah.
think that both diets are great, and but it's just a matter of like finding which one suits you best. And so yeah, so but I also found for me personally, the Walls diet was just a little bit more sustainable in terms of like I could go out to a friend's place and it didn't for dinner, and didn't feel like
Yeah.
I had to be quite so I suppose there was maybe just um, a little bit more, not more flexibility, but uh, I suppose it was easier to sort of eat in line with a World's protocol when you're out and about, or when you're catching up
Right.
with friends at a restaurant, than it was for Jelinek. So for my lifestyle, that sort of suited quite well as well. But,
Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned a little bit there about so it was 10 years ago that you started up Mastering Mountains.
Yes.
So what's happened in the last 10 years with Mastering Mountains? Where are you at now?
Well, so yeah, so the last 10 years with Mastery Mountains have been it's been a journey. It's been a really exciting one. And so we have um, I suppose the way that we help people has evolved quite a lot over the last 10 years. Initially, we gave quite small grants for yeah, but personal trainer or the neurophysio or something, and it was and we tended to just sort of give the money, be like, have fun, catch you at the finish line, and send us some pictures. And so we were quite sort of hands off, and
Yeah.
sort of realized that actually, and I suppose my in those last 10 years, I've had a couple of big relapses and a re-diagnosis. And I suppose for me, that whole process really highlighted the fact that actually my personal rehabilitation process during that time really highlighted the fact that actually there's more than just like the neurophysio or the exercise physiologist input required to sort of successfully maintain access to the outdoors in the long term. And so, so with time, we sort of began moving more and more towards the rehab component of the neurophysio, and investing more and more into that. And but then also developing more and more a sort of a bit of a mentoring model. Um, and the mentoring is, I suppose, about really just walking alongside the people that we work with, our program participants, um, and journeying with them through the highs and the lows, because there are always highs and always lows. There are really discouraging moments, moments of victory and joy, and sort of just being with them in those moments to help them reach their goal, and to help them break it down, and then also just to look at to find strategies and tools that help them not just achieve their goal, but actually continue achieving future goals. And so looking at things like pacing, or how to control your temperature, or mindset towards the highs and lows, and thinking about just some of those broader skills and strategies that we need to succeed in what we're doing. So we've got the rehab focus, and that's where the majority of our budget goes. And then we've got this this mentoring thing, which has become more and more of a more integral part of the Mastering Mountains experience, for want of a better word. And so or the Mastering Mountains journey, that'd be better. And so it's been really exciting. So I think over the 10 years, we have helped helped 16 people, I think. And
wow.
We've been very privileged to give away over $50,000, I think. So and most of that's all gone towards neurophysio costs, or exercise physiologist costs. And then generally we set people up with gear, and with any gear that they need. And it's been fantastic.
That is fantastic, because like you say, it's not just helping them achieve that one goal of, a 4-hour tramp, or, hiking up a mountain. You're setting them up with skills on how to continue their exercise journey, their fitness journey, to keep them healthier for life.
Exactly. And that's that's exactly the thing that we see now, much more than we did at the beginning. We see the adventure that people embark on as really just a mechanism for learning some of these things. So we want to see people flourish and thrive, and not just in the outdoors, but across other areas of life as well. And so we're like, okay, well, how do we help people thrive and flourish, have hope, and optimism about the future? How do we help them through this experience to develop those skills?
Brilliant.
So, yeah.
And here you are, just about to celebrate your 10-year anniversary. Is that right?
I know. Yeah. So
wow,
it's been great. Yeah. And of course, like MS New Zealand has been such an integral part of that as well. Like at the beginning, I really had not much of an idea what I was doing, and so MSNZ was really a massive help, particularly in those. I mean, it's still, but particularly in those early days where we were just sort of trying to figure some of this stuff out and things, and sort of having that support has been invaluable.
Oh, brilliant. So we're just going to back up a little bit there, because you dropped a little statement in there earlier about being re-diagnosed. So what's that all about?
Oh man. So in 2019, again, this bears quite a few similarities to when I first got sick when I was 21. And so in 2015, I went out for a run one morning, and which I did most mornings. And at that time, I was probably burning the candle at both ends again, and pushing myself quite hard. And so I went out for a run, and I was just feeling a bit off, and I started feeling a bit disorientated. I got home and sort of got home, said hi to Bex and my wife, and within about an hour, I was not able to communicate. I could not really understand anything that she was saying to me. I had zero balance. I couldn't even undress myself out of my sweaty running gear. And again, visual processing went out the window. And just like it was the weirdest thing. I've had brain fog off and on for years now, but this was like not like brain fog. This was like next level brain fog. It was like a dark curtain had just gone through my mind, and I just nothing made sense anymore. It was the weirdest thing. And so went to see the GP, who got us rushed to hospital for a neurological exam. The neurologist there on duty couldn't quite sort of figure out what was going on, and then so I got referred to Debbie Mason, and so I went and saw her, and I suppose in the lead up to this event of this massive flare up after a run, there just been increasingly these kind of weird symptoms. They were just like in the background, but they just were increasingly making not much sense with the MS diagnosis, and so they were kind of they were just kind of a bit weird. And so I went to see Debbie Mason, and she had a couple of appointments with her, and she sort of reviewed everything, started from scratch, and she in my second appointment, she diagnosed me as having a functional neurological disorder, or FND.
Okay, and so not said, MS at all.
Not MS at all, but she said, look, so FND, it's in many ways, just like MS, where there is this breakdown in communication between the brain and the body. So for MS, that's because of myelin damage, that kind of thing. But for FND, there's the same breakdown in communication between the brain and the body, but it's for different reasons, and so not resulting from like the development of plaques. And which explains why with my flare-up, there was some questionable plaques, I think, in my MRIs previously, and then this was, or some questionable things. I don't know if they were plaques in the end, but there are some questionable things. But with the progress of these symptoms, there hadn't been a matching change in whatever was on my spine and brain. So there was this mismatch there. And so she said, look, FND can present almost exactly like MS and or epilepsy, or a few other things. And she said that for the majority of neurologists, it completely makes sense that they would misdiagnose this as a MS. But she said, when I see MS patients every single day, that's my thing. She's like, well, you just notice the things that just don't quite make sense. And she said, oh, that's why she started looking for a different alternative. And so that was a complete, it was a bit of a mind-blowing moment for me, because I'd never heard of FND. And my whole life had been built around the assumption of, the way I ate, the way I exercised, everything was around MS. And then all of a sudden, the rug is pulled out from under me, and I don't have MS, and I have FND. And then I got home, and I jumped onto Amazon because I was like, I need to find out about FND. And I did a Google, an Amazon search for books on FND, and I think that there were like half a dozen texts, and maybe I think maybe all but one of them were academic. And so like there was just no information out there about it, and that was another really unnerving thing coming from something like MS, which is, there's obviously heaps to still know and learn about MS, but it's like there are some quite key components that are still somewhat understood, at least anyway. And there's research showing, if you make these lifestyle modifications, then you're X% likely of progressing in this way, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of by comparison to FND quite well understood, and by comparison to FND. And so it was just oh man, it took a lot to process, actually, and it probably took me a good 18 months or 2 years actually before I could even talk about it to other people. And so yeah, it was enormous, but yeah, it opened my eyes to this complete world which I had no idea about with FND and FND related illnesses. And so, yeah, that was really interesting.
Quite a turnaround. So have you found that healthy eating and exercise still helps you regardless of which diagnosis you received?
Yeah, yeah. I think that perhaps with yes, absolutely, and I think that perhaps the diet doesn't have the same the diet doesn't impact the body in the same way that it does for MS. Like because I'm not trying to control inflammation responses or the development of plaques and healthy fats and that kind of thing. But absolutely, there are still foods that make my symptoms worse. So for me, sugary things are just like the worst thing ever. So avoiding and allergens are still really likely to make things flare up. So I still avoid like the plague refined foods in general, but specifically refined sugar. Still no dairy, no gluten, and yeah. So I try to eat. It's probably a more aligned with a general paleo diet now. So keeps a focus on seeds and nuts, whole foods, and minimal grains. I do have a little bit of rice and stuff now still, but yeah, and just lots of good quality meats and fats.
So no more pies and Red Bull for you?
No more pies and Red Bull. Oh my word. Although I have to confess, I did find a gluten-free pie probably a year or two ago, which I did eat, and kind of not as good as I remembered, and I did definitely regret it afterwards. I felt really lethargic. Yeah, so very, very occasionally I'll have pies, but absolutely no Red Bulls or fizzy drinks or anything. So that's a pretty strict no-go.
Yeah, I'm glad you found a diet that works for you.
Yeah.
So as well as keeping active and trying to eat as healthy as possible, do you have any more top tips on how you would live well with such a condition?
Yeah, I think that exercise for me, so movement is so important, and there is a really direct relationship between how much or little I'm moving and my experience of the of symptoms. And so movement is essential, but just like with MS, managing stress is key. So stress really causes things to flare up, and so stress management, absolute key. And I think that so for me, I've perhaps always been a or at least in the past, certainly I've been a very performance oriented person. So about achievement and that kind of thing. And I think just learning for me to let some of that stuff go has been really enormous, and just to be more compassionate on myself. And so I know that that's perhaps my thing, and not everybody's going to struggle with that in the same way. But I think that certainly having self-compassion, being easy on yourself, is another really good skill to develop in terms of managing symptoms and stuff, so that you're not pushing, and that's the thing.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, I guess you're having to, you've had to learn how to listen to your body and react accordingly.
Yeah. And for me, I think for the up until this, the big relapse in 2019, I would listen to my body somewhat, but I'd become very, very skilled at kind of just pressing on and ignoring, and that was like my default. And that if I just kept on pushing through, then it would be okay. But you can only do that for so long, and then the results are disastrous. You know,
Yeah.
whether you've got FND or MS, and so I think, yeah, so learning to listen, but at the same time, learning to find that balance, which I still don't always achieve, but learning to find that balance of, yep, listening to your body, but then at the same time, just pushing the boat out very, very slowly so that you can increase your capacity for exercise and that kind of thing. So there's this real fine balance between just gentle pushing and listening to your body. And
it'll be similar to what you did years ago when you managed to take, 1 second of standing on one foot and you gradually increased it to 10 seconds.
Exactly.
It has to be done little bit by little bit, but when you look back, you can see the progress that you've made.
That's right, and exactly, and so as a general rule, for anything that I try and do, but I suppose particularly physical things, my rule of thumb is no more than a 10% increase over 2 weeks, and so I try and like, it is a rule of thumb. Sometimes I do more, sometimes I do less, but I do try and like if I'm going on a walk or something, I look back and I walked for this long last time. Try not to do too much more than 10% next time, and allowing a good period in between. So yeah, no more than 10% over 2 weeks is just keeps things slowly moving forward without
Bust or boom.
Well, 100%. That's the thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I was going to ask you, being diagnosed, sorry if you can hear that dog barking, she's mine.
Oh, no, I can't. No, it's all good.
Being diagnosed with a neurological disease can be confronting. Wonderfully, you had your parents around you at the time, and your mum was obviously quite an advocate for you.
Yes.
Was there anyone else around that you could sort of lean upon during that time?
Not during my MS diagnosis.
Or your re-diagnosis?
A bit, yes, with my re-diagnosis, my in the intervening years, I got married, which was great, and my wife Bex is she is amazing, and so yeah, I think there's been quite a. We hadn't long been married when I had that big relapse, only a couple of years, and so that was it's quite a big thing to journey through together.
Yeah.
But she has been phenomenal, and I think that one thing which I have learned since the MS diagnosis is the importance of community. And while I didn't have a very big circle of people to lean upon, I think just being really intentional about leaning on, just staying in contact with friends, and having conversations, even if you're not talking about what's going on, just staying connected. Even if it's just with
quite easy to isolate yourself, isn't it?
Oh, so easy, which is what I did the last time. And so yeah, just staying connected and being really intentional about that has made a big difference. It doesn't have to be a big group, just a small handful of high quality friends, and you're good.
And what about support for Bex throughout the years? Has she got people to lean on as well?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a good question, and it has been really difficult for her at times. And her family, her parents have been an amazing support. She's had one or two really great friends to lean on, but I was very fortunate in that. So through some of this, I got into the chronic pain unit at Burwood Hospital.
Yes.
And that was amazing. It was phenomenal, and the care received there was just it's the best medical care I've ever received. But through that, Bex was able to get a bit of support as well, which was really awesome.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, just one more question, because I'm aware that we've kept you on here for quite a long time, and I don't want you to be getting fatigued.
No worries.
If you had a takeaway message for somebody that might be at the beginning of their diagnosis journey, what would you like them to know?
Great question. I think Yeah, so for someone who is at the beginning of their diagnosis journey with a neurological disease, I reckon like I reckon it would be great for them to know and be assured of that while having a neurological disease does mean change, and that's kind of unavoidable, that there is every reason to have hope and to feel optimistic. Like, yes, there are going to be big challenges, but you know, if you've got good community, if you've got a good medical team, if you are willing to make the changes, there's actually every reason to remain hopeful. Like, yep, life is going to look different, but it doesn't mean that it has to be the end of your dreams and hopes and ambitions. Uh, I'm confident that that with the right support, you'll just be able to find a modified version of them. And so, yeah.
I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you, Nick. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure
Oh,
you've realized going through your initial diagnosis and then secondary diagnosis, the more information that's out there for people, the more comforting they will be, the more they will feel that they're not isolated and alone. And
absolutely.
yeah, so thank you. Thank you for sharing your story.
No worries. A pleasure and awesome chatting.